All right, really cool interview here. Looking forward to this. Excited to have him on. Jeff Nuccetelli joining UAP here. Jeff, thanks for coming on the Unidentified Alien Podcast. Happy to have you.
Happy to be here. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yours is a story that I think some, if not most people are familiar with. And if they're not, quite frankly, they should be familiar with it because yours is really quite an incredible experience, especially given your background, your history within the Air Force and law enforcement through the Air Force and all these different things that you've been through. So first off, before we get into your story and then some of the other details and topics that we want to cover here today, for anybody who doesn't know your history, what is your military background and your experience?
Yeah, so I joined the Air Force when I was 18. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, so yeah, I joined the Air Force at 18. I wanted to do something uh, with a gun. I wanted to have a weapon. So I when I went into the recruiter, they went through all the different specialty codes, and Air Force is very heavy on high tech kind of jobs and administrative type jobs. And really, the only thing I could find where I would get some kind of combat training or carry a weapon every day was being a police officer. So yeah, I signed up for that. Uh, Went to basic training, and then went to the police academy, and then some of the other ancillary training. And my first assignment was in Japan. I got stationed in Misawa Air Force Base, Japan, the 35th Fighter Wing. And then my next assignment was at Vandenburg at U.S. Space Command. Um, and yeah, I had a pretty active career, heavily involved in law enforcement. I got to work a lot with some really high caliber civilian law enforcement agencies like California Highway Patrol and various sheriff's departments, things like that. So yeah, I had a really active, really cool career. And then yeah, I did 16 years, and I got out, and then became a private citizen.
Very cool. Well, thank you for all your service. Always much appreciated. So when we go to the Vandenberg scene, so when you're there, you're stationed at Vandenberg, and I think a lot of people know that name. Pretty famous base, and quite honestly, pretty famous in UFO lore. I mean,
Yeah,
that's one of
quite a
those.
legacy at that base. Yeah, a lot.
Exactly right. And your story actually is one of those that's kind of got added into the legacy, to the lore of Vandenberg. So for anybody who doesn't know, and I will preface this, by the way, by saying that I know there's only so much you can say when it comes to this experience that you had in 2003 at Vandenberg. So don't feel pressured to give more than you currently can. Hopefully maybe down the road we could hear a little bit more when you're able to do that. But for right now, whatever you can give us as far as the details of that experience you had in 2003.
Great. Yeah. So in that time frame, I'd been at Vandenberg for somewhere around 3 or 4 years, so I was pretty well established, knew everyone. I was assigned to Bravo Flight, um, military police work in flights, which is like a platoon, an army platoon. So we had about 60 to 100, over 100 people on each flight. And I came into work about an hour early to do changeover with the offgoing leadership. Delta Flight had been working that morning, the day shift. So yeah, I came into work, and I was immediately briefed by all the people there about this real world UFO encounter that had happened that morning.
So you're coming in for the night shift.
Right. Yeah, we worked 12-hour shifts. There were more like 14 or 15-hour shifts. So two flights would be on duty in a 24-hour period. So Delta Flight had been working. I came on to relieve them. And yeah, and the whole squadron was kind of a buzz with this story about this wild event that had happened.
Mm.
And very quickly, I figured out that they were not joking or pranking, or it was a very serious event. And I went up and I went to the command center. I met with the Delta Flight leadership, and they gave me a briefing on what had happened. And all this was covered in the congressional hearing in July 2023. So basic story was we had 3 Boeing contractors working on a national missile defense silo on the north end of the base. And they were doing routine maintenance or some kind of work out there. And one of the contractors walked out of the building or the hangar and looked up, and there was this gigantic floating red square
Hmm.
at low altitude, just hovering silently over the launch pad. So, he looks up at it. He can't believe what he's seeing. He gets 2 of his coworkers to come out. Now they're all looking at it. They observe it for some period of time. They can't figure out what's going on. And they called and reported the incident to their range control, which is a command center that oversees the various operations. So they called their range control. They briefed them on what was happening. The controller at range control, he reached out to all the various other command centers on the base. He called the weather station, asked them if they had any balloons or anything in the air. They said negative. Called the radar station, nothing on radar, and on and on. So he made various notifications trying to find out if there was anything in the air. No one reported that they knew what it was. And then he called the law enforcement desk, our command center, and that's how the police got involved.
Hmm.
He briefed the police on what was occurring, and the Delta flight leadership, their flight chief and their senior patrolman, who was my counterpart. I was the senior patrolman for Bravo flight at the time. They were dispatched, and they went out and they investigated. So they didn't see anything. When they got there, they talked to the contractors, got the story, and then they had them write sworn written statements about what they saw, because the object had left and it had floated onto the installation. So it was somewhere on the base. Wow. At low altitude. And the patrolman took down all the data. They came back. We up-channeled it to all the command post on the base, let them know. They contacted various other agencies on the base to find out if they knew what was going on and to brief them of the situation. And then that was it. We kind of, they went back to work. They didn't know what to do. They couldn't locate this object. We didn't have any kind of checklist or protocol in place to deal with unidentified flying objects. And then that was kind of it. They went back on duty, and then we went on duty. And then that evening we had another encounter, possibly with the same object or something similar. We had a nighttime incursion. That happened to people that I'm very close friends with. I'm still good friends with them. They were people that I knew very well, and and the same kind of thing. They had this weird encounter. Then the object shot off, and I went out and I investigated as it was occurring. And then, I met with all the witnesses. I took sworn written statements, and then we generated a report. We up-channeled all the information to higher headquarters. And then, it was like, you just go back to work.
Wow.
So
they just expect you. So after seeing these cubes fly over twice, once during the day, once at night, it's just kind of business as usual after that. I mean, did anybody report anything the next day, the week after? Or was this a one-off?
I don't remember exactly if we had anything like immediately preceding or after the event, but there were multiple other patrolmen that did see lights that night. And then we had other events that happened in the preceding days following. I can't get into all that right now. But then, so to answer your question, yeah, other strange UAP UFO encounters did continue over the period of October 2003. And then I had an event that I can talk about that happened on Vandenberg in 2005.
Okay, so a couple of years later is where you had your own personal experience after kind of being, well, maybe indoctrinated, introduced to this personally. A couple of years later, you actually see something yourself, have something that happened to you.
Yeah. So what happened with me? This was, like I said, around 2005. By this time, I was the non-commissioned officer in charge of our law enforcement program. So I was sort of the program manager for our LE mission. And we think, me and the other witnesses think it happened around April. We think it might have been around my birthday. And I had a party. So all my coworkers had come over during, for a big barbecue. And later that night, everybody kind of left. And two of my friends were still with me in the backyard. We were sitting around a fire, having a beer. And the odd thing was we were talking about this very subject.
Hmm.
And because there had been so many weird things that had happened in Vandenberg, and some of my other friends, their parents were also military, and they were telling me about some of the events that their parents had witnessed while they were in the military, similar type events.
Huh.
And we were having this really deep conversation about, what are these things? Why do they show up? What's happening? And my friend Phoenix, it was her and her boyfriend. Now they're married. They've been married, since 2000 something. And she said, "Hey guys, do you see that light?" And we all looked up and we're like, "Wow, what is it?" And it looked like a satellite at high altitude, and it was kind of tracking roughly like heading west to east, like coming out from over the ocean at very high altitude. And it looked like it might have been like a Starlink or something, but it was weird.
Yeah.
It was pulsating with this steady, rhythmic, pulsing glow. It was a very white, like almost bluish white light, very clear. Clear night, little bit of clouds, but we could see the stars and everything. And we all got up, off our feet, and we were watching it for a while, trying to figure out what it was. And at first we're like satellite, but then the pulsing threw us off. We'd never seen anything like that. We thought, oh, maybe it's an atmospheric effect, or maybe it's a plane at high altitude with the strobe. But the longer we watched it, the weirder it got. And then eventually it seemed to grow brighter and drop in elevation. And then it kind of started to move erratically. It started to, I describe it as fluttering.
Hmm.
And it went from a very like normal, like moving object in a straight line. And then it started to sort of like dance around. And that's when we got really, really like kind of freaked out, like, oh my God, what are we looking at?
So are we talking like appearing and reappearing in different spots, or are we talking like zooming from one spot to the next?
It was sort of at that point we had a visual on it the entire time, and it would sort of like flutter. It would move directions almost like a leaf in the wind, or like a butterfly flying through the wind. And it was just moving erratically. It would go from left to right, to up to down, and it was moving like nothing we had ever seen.
Oh.
An aircraft move. It was moving like a butterfly in the wind.
Huh.
But it was subtle, but noticeable. This fluttering pattern. And we kept watching, and we got more and more excited and interested. And eventually, it dropped very low in altitude and elevation, and it got very big and bright. And the light was just very strange, bluish white. And the odd thing about the pulsating, and it was, when it got closer, it looked perfectly round.
Hmm.
And it looked solid, but we couldn't see any kind of structure. It just looked like an orb, if you will. I described it as it looked like a glowing hard marble.
Hmm.
Because when the light would radiate out from it, the light would almost it didn't diffuse properly. It would like stop at like a fixed point. So it would look like it was like growing, and it would look like a larger marble, but you could still see the object in the middle. So it wasn't
Almost
like it was getting bigger and contracting.
sounds like some type of like plasma energy. You think I'm off on that, or
Now, I've had people that know about plasma energy mention that maybe it was something like that.
Hmm.
But yeah, but then eventually it disappeared. And we had three sets of eyeballs on it, and it just was gone.
wow,
And then
like
we
like an instantaneous acceleration, or just
no, it just was there one moment and then not the next. Like it
wow,
blinked out, like it was gone. And that happened a couple of times. It would pop back into view in the same general patch of sky, and then it would fade again. And then it came back into view, and then it dropped and came down like 250 feet over my house.
hmm,
This happened on Vandenberg in base housing, and it was hovering like 250 feet over us, and then it vanished. It popped out of view, and we were all standing there together, like looking at each other, kind of in awe, in shock, and then I remember like keeping my eyes fixed on that patch over my house, but then my eyes were tracking to the right. Like my head and my eyes were moving, even though I couldn't see anything. And then it came back into view, and this object was, we estimate, 30 to 50 feet in diameter.
okay,
And when it popped back into view, my eyes had tracked it to where it was. It had moved, I don't know, like maybe like 100 feet, and my eyes tracked it while it was invisible.
wow,
And that kind of like elicited like a gasp from all of us, and they're like, "Oh my God, there it is again." And then I remember distinctly having this moment of like just sheer panic and fear shoot through me. And I looked at it, and I looked at my friends, and I looked at my house, and I looked back at it, and then I had all this fear. It turned from like wonder and excitement to like sheer terror.
hmm,
And I had this thought that ran through my head. I was like, "Oh my God, is it going to take us?"
wow,
And my ex-wife was in the house, asleep, and that all just went through my mind like, "Oh my God, are we about to be abducted?" And then I took a deep breath and calmed down, and then I just focused on it, and I didn't take my eyes off of it again. And then it started to gently rise, and then it started to accelerate, and basically it left and raised in altitude, and it stayed visible. It wasn't instantaneous acceleration, but it rapidly accelerated, and we watched it until it disappeared like a star into the night sky. We watched it until it got smaller and smaller until it was a pinprick of light, and then it was lost. And then, we were just kind of standing there like in awe. And I went into the house, I picked up my landline, I called the control center, and this was like probably 1 o'clock in the morning. And the command center answered. I said, "Hey, man, I know this sounds crazy, but here's what just happened." I told them what happened. I told them who was there with me. And I told them, "I need you to call weather, call the radar station, call the command post, and find out what's going on." So a little bit of time went by. Then the command center called me back. They said nothing on radar, no balloons, no helicopters, no aircraft. And I told them, "Okay, roger that." And I said, "Please log this in the blotter, put my name, the other witnesses in, and up channel it." And I told them when I come into work in the morning, we'll write statements. I'll type up a report and I'll submit it.
hmm,
And that was it.
incredible. So that is on the books. That's an official record, the sighting on Vandenberg in 2005.
Yeah, it was reported. Whether the records still exist or not, that's the question.
Right. And so when we talk about the witnesses there, Jeff, how many would you say? I mean, as far as you and your group of friends, was it about 5, 6 of you, or
That night, it was me and two other people.
okay, so it was
They were
just you
both,
and
yeah,
the couple.
military
Okay.
police, good friends of mine. So yeah.
Okay. And but like there's no deviation. Like all three of you saw the same thing, you explained, seen the same thing. It
Yeah,
was
with minor variations, like, my friend Phoenix, she's the one that spotted it initially. I thought it was about 500 feet over the house and about 50 feet in diameter. She thought it was about 200 to 250 feet and about 30 feet in diameter.
okay.
So on default, I go with her estimation. But yeah, basically, with we all kind of saw the same thing. With our memories have a little bit of variation, but yeah.
I do wonder when it comes to there was something you said that really struck me about how you were able to follow it even though it wasn't there. As far as you know, were you the only one who was able to do that, or did your friends say, "Hey, yeah, that happened to us too"?
They don't remember tracking it when it was like invisible. They remember it, being visible, then not visible. But I don't remember them saying that they could track it like I was.
And the reason I ask it, and maybe, forgive me if I'm getting a little bit too like woo woo here, but it's I just start to wonder where was there possibly, or did you feel like there was some type of connection that you had with this craft? Because I'm thinking about what we hear now 20 years later with Jake Barber or anybody else, as far as the psionic aspect of things, which we'll get into a little bit later, your thoughts on that discussion currently. Um, do you feel like you had a similar connection? Obviously, not a similar feeling. Jake Barber talked about this feeling of peace and love and happiness. You had a very different, quite the opposite, actually. But do you feel like you had a connection somehow, and that's why you're able to follow it, even though it wasn't there?
I don't. I'm not sure. I just remember being so intently focused on it. I was afraid to take my eyes off it because I thought it would disappear or anything. But I don't remember anything like like an overwhelming connection or anything like that. I just remember being intently focused on it and in a state of complete like disbelief and awe.
What do other military members, or just if you want to break it down to Air Force members, think about this when they've heard this story over the years? I know you've spoken to Ryan Graves about it. In fact, Ryan Graves told the story in front of Congress
Right, right.
back in during the first congressional hearings in the summer of 23. So, what kind of reaction do you get? Is it a mix of, dude, I don't know what you're talking about, mixed with, you know what, I've actually seen stuff too, but I've never spoken about it? Is it a little bit of both?
It is a bit of both. And so what used to happen, like when the initial Vandenberg events happened, uh, there was no doubt that something had happened, but there were people that were on duty when the initial like Red Square event happened that just dismissed it out of just outright. They're like, "What? I don't know what it was, but it wasn't anything abnormal, right?" They thought it's a balloon, or they just completely wrote it off. It's completely not interesting, and they just go about their day. And then there were other people that were skeptical, but they're like, okay. And then there were people like me that were like all in on it, like excited and like curious and trying to, figure out and constantly talking about it. And then throughout my career, like we'd be having a party or something, and people start telling stories, like war stories or law enforcement stories or a ghost story. And when me and my friends did lived through all that would start telling, well, about our UFO stories, it was kind of the same thing. Like other people would just be like, "You guys are full of, your
Mhm.
BS," and other people believed it. And then sometimes they'd be like, "Oh, well, when I was in England or when I was in Japan or in Korea, I saw something weird." So throughout my career, I had the, I guess, good fortune of having people that would come to me and share their anomalous experiences with me. Um, so there was like this general idea that some people experience weird things like UFOs, and then there are people that go through an entire career and never see anything abnormal.
Mm.
So it's kind of a mixed bag. But the good thing for me was, like, I'd be at a party and somebody would call BS on me and my friends, and I'd go get the paperwork and I'd be like, read that.
Yeah.
You know?
Throw it down in front of them.
Yeah.
When you are told other stories from, fellow members of the Air Force or just military in general, is it similar to what you experienced? Because that's a pretty extreme sighting that you had, or is it more? Is it less? I mean, what kind of other experiences have you heard from military members or Air Force?
Some of them are as extraordinary. Some of them are just like they've seen weird lights or things zooming around that they can't explain. A lot of ghost stories and paranormal type stories, and that those type of stories started right when I joined. Like I was like 18 when I got to Japan, turned 19. No, I was 19 when I got to Japan, and you're getting to meet people, you're going to parties, you're socializing, and then people start to tell you weird ghost stories that happened to them while they were on duty. They
Hmm.
I had a supervisor in Japan that called in a ghost. He was on an armed response team protecting a protection level 1 resource, which is the highest level protection. And I was on duty when that happened. He called in a ghost. They were screaming over the radio. Um, and like I said, the guy was my supervisor. And then our flight chief, our boss, came out, like the platoon sergeant came out, because this triggered an armed response. So there was, at least around me, there were always weird things happening, not like constantly, but here and there, like something strange would happen, and it would happen on duty. It would trigger a response. It would get reported sometimes. So there was always like this general like layer of weirdness, like superimposed over your regular waking life.
Crazy. Why do you think that is? Have you reflected on that before, where you say to yourself, the old "why me" question? What have you come up with on that?
Yeah, I think it's just because that reality is stranger and more mysterious than we give it credit. Um, and I kind of went through that myself. I went through a period where I was, very scientifically minded, materialistic. I sort of like walked away from religion, and because when I was younger, um, I've always been interested in religion and mythology and magical traditions and and things like that. And then as I got older, skepticism kind of takes hold, and then I kind of wrote it all off. I'm like, there's not anything here. It's all superstition and nonsense. Uh, but the experiences in the military would never let me get comfortable in that skeptical world. It kept things kept happening,
Hmm.
and kept happening to people that I really trusted and that were highly credible. So like UFO events all over the world, and weird ghost stories all over the world. And I witnessed a lot of that too. Like I might not have been like there when they saw a ghost or whatever, but I would be on duty and I'd hear it play out over the radio.
Oh,
So over the years, I've had to constantly update my like the paradigm, like the ontological paradigm that I have in my head. And then when Vandenburg happened, that really changed everything for me. There was like no doubt anymore. There's
yeah.
like no doubt.
So when you say that, it's funny because I was just about to ask, what do you think you experienced when it comes to 2005 versus 2003? Now, 2003, that was kind of happening around you with these cubes, day and night, and then 2005 is when you have your own personal experience, like glowing orb comes down. Do you think they were the same thing, and what do you think they were?
I don't think they were the same thing, and I don't know. I've been thinking about this, since the day it happened. It never goes away, right? You're always kind of going back, trying to figure out, what was it, why was it there. So the fundamental, I guess, like place where I begin is, I think it's important that we were having a very active and deep conversation about the topic, about the UFO phenomenon when it occurred.
Hmm.
So I think I don't believe in coincidences anymore. And part of that is from my law enforcement background, and part of that is from my religious belief. Um, and that's sort of something that I have come to believe in the last, like, say, 10 years. I'm like, there are no coincidences. Everything is happening for some strange, inexplicable reason. Everything's kind of connected. So I think that there is a connection uh, with consciousness, like, because we were discussing it and thinking deeply about it, and then one showed up and said hello. And I also, when the initial incursions had happened, I was desperately trying to find and see a UFO.
Hmm.
I was out with like night vision, going crazy. I'm like, I needed to see one so bad, and I didn't. And a couple of my really, really good friends did.
Hmm.
So I was like super bummed out. I'm like, I'm hearing it all on the radio, but I'm like, I didn't get to see the thing. And then in 2005, I got to see one. Like, it's like your wish came true.
Hmm.
And so I don't know what it was, but like I remember when all this started happening with the hearing and everything. I hadn't really talked to any of my friends that had witnessed that for a long time, and then I had to reach out to them, and then we started to hash out the story. Like, what do you remember? What do I remember? And I remember Phoenix said, when the craft arrived, and she used the word craft.
Hmm.
And when she said that, it kind of hit me, and I realized, oh, I haven't been thinking about it as a craft. I like, for some reason my brain never like put together like, oh, there's a living thing in that orb piloting it.
Hmm.
So then I just think, well, maybe it could be something spiritual, it could be something extraterrestrial, it could be something natural, um, and that's really all I can say. Like, I don't know what it is, and I don't have a strong like belief. Like, I know that was X, Y, or Z. I don't know, and that's why I'm kind of still on this journey. I'm hoping that we can all find out what is going on.
Wow.
What are the things flying around in our skies and in our oceans, and allegedly even underground. You know,
Right.
so yeah, I don't know.
Fascinating. Yeah, really fascinating. I do wonder, and like I said, I do want to hit on some of the other um, topics that I have written down. So hopefully we get to. But when it comes to this event, two questions pop in my head. Number one, um, was it making any sound in 2005 when we talk about just strictly that, any sound to be heard? And two, do you feel like it left after you were experiencing that sheer terror you talked about?
No sound whatsoever.
Okay.
It was completely silent. Not even like a humming, or there was nothing.
Same on the cubes as well from those reports? No sound?
Those were completely silent too.
Okay.
Um, and then no, I don't think the fear triggered it, because this whole thing happened in like, it was over my house for maybe like 30 seconds. This happened very quickly.
Hmm.
We watched, it was a few minutes as we observed it from high altitude come down. But in that, like, I don't know, 30 second to probably less than a minute, it was there. That that shock of terror I had happened probably in the first, like, I don't know, 10 or 15 seconds. And then I was very calm and focused, and like in a state of wonderment and awe. And then it sort of gently, like, left. It didn't like hurry off. I didn't get a sense that like that no. So I don't think that negative emotion triggered the exit. I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious when you're talking about it. I'm like, geez, I wonder if there's like some instance where it felt like it was being scared away, but
Yeah.
it's man, wild stuff. Now I know you have spoken to AARO about these incidences. What do they say? Are they taking it seriously? Did they brush you off? Are you still, if you can answer, are you still in contact about these different things?
Yeah. So they took it very seriously. It was a collaborative effort. They provided me as much information as they're able to. The case, as far as I know, I haven't reached out to them for a while. It's been a couple of months, but they did verify relatively recently that the case is still active and open and being investigated. Several times they reached out and provided me with updates about like tracking paperwork down and different things like that. They did verify that it is not related to any kind of U.S. government special access programs or U.S. tech. So they ruled that out.
Hmm.
So they know, according to them, it wasn't anything we were doing. So yeah, they took it very seriously, and
Wow.
and yeah, it's a very important case from what I understand.
Wow. So let me ask you this: that now that they've ruled out, which I didn't know, I'm glad you said that they've ruled out U.S. tech or any type of special access programs. Why can't it be? And I'm sure you've thought about this, or you've had it even in your interviews. Why can't it be adversarial? Why couldn't it have been? Whether it was what you saw personally in '05 or the Cube incident in '03, why can't that be China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, any adversary? Just in your experience.
I suppose it could, but
Okay.
it would mean that they have beyond next generation tech that somehow they leapfrog the United States and DARPA and Boeing and all these contractors by decades, right?
Yeah, because that was interesting. You said there were Boeing contractors who reported the cube on
Yeah,
Vandenberg in '03. If anybody would know about it, special access program, it would be contractors from Boeing, you would think, and they
yeah,
were dumbfounded by it.
yeah, and that's a good point because what those contractors were working on was next generation tech.
Mm,
So this was the National Missile Defense Project. This is like the follow on to the original Star Wars program, and yeah, what they were doing was like in incredibly difficult technological advancements. They're trying to shoot a bullet with a bullet, you know, with hypersonic missiles. I mean, incredibly complicated what they were trying to do, and I don't even know if they were ever successful in this program because it's so challenging, from an engineering and material science standpoint.
man.
So that would mean the Chinese or the Russians were able to leapfrog us by decades. And if that were the case, then the world, in my view, they would either play. The Chinese would be playing it like, okay, we're gonna keep this a secret. We've let you know that it's checkmate. We've won. We're in control of the planet. So we're just gonna let things play out. But I don't see why the Chinese or the Russians would have to play that game if they had that kind of tech. It would just be checkmate. Like game over. Like we're in charge of the planet.
They would make it known, right? Like that's the MO. They would make it known.
I
You would
would
think.
assume they would because why play games at that point?
Yeah.
They could just shut down our nuclear arsenals and bomb anything they want. And if you've got that kind of tech, they would already, have new Beijing on the moon, right? Why not?
Yeah. No, it's a fair
So
point.
that's where I'm coming from. Like, why would if they're that far ahead, why would they wait to let the world know that they're the dominant power?
Right. Right. And I think even we can go back if we even connect this to, and I wonder if you've made this correlation before, you connect it to something like Robert Salas, where Robert Salas in the Malmstrom Air Force Base back in the early 60s, where you talk about shutting down nukes, where those, glowing orbs were seen over the base and literally shut down the nukes. And it just within that same time frame, a few years later, you have Big Sur, also in California, where the ICBM test is shut down midair by a UFO. So, I mean, these are things happening back in the 60s, well before. I mean, we can speculate anything we want about who has what technology in 2025 or what they had 20 years ago. But I think you would agree that we can say pretty confidently no one had any technology like that 60 years ago.
Right. Unless all these rumors that are kind of percolating now in the community about anti-gravity and new physics that went underground and were classified. And
Hmm.
but even that explanation doesn't explain the historical record, right? You could go back into time, into antiquity, and human beings have been observing things in the sky and on the ground, for as long as humans have been human. So there's no accounting technology with the historical record, at all.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And actually, to that point, we can connect it to what is happening now, what people are seeing in the skies now. And I've had this conversation a couple of times with different people, Jeff. Actually, just recently, I had on Mayor Michael Milham from Belleville, New Jersey.
That's right down the road from me. Yep.
There you go. So, and he mentioned when it comes to the drones, obviously, if anybody hasn't caught on by now, we're talking about the drones. And he mentioned that these things are still flying over his home. Like this isn't like, oh, remember when this happened back in December? Like it's still happening now. So can you, in your experience, do you think you can make any type of connections to what we're seeing now to anything that you saw or heard about 20 years ago?
So my girlfriend just saw a drone,
Hmm.
I think like 4 or 5 days ago. Yeah, they're still here.
Wow.
She saw one. So my house is right near, Belleville.
Okay.
I can look out my window. I could see Manhattan, and we watched the drones for hours one night. I mean, from like
Wow.
6 p.m. till after midnight. We stood in this window. They were 200 feet over the house. They were doing a pattern over Manhattan. All of our neighbors know about them. We all talked about them. The drones are anomalous for sure. They're not drones. I mean, they're
Right.
they're UAP, period. Now
Hmm.
there might be a mix, but all the objects that were here, there were no noise. She saw one that was larger than two helicopters about 250 feet over the house.
Wow.
No noise, no rotor wash. We're all very familiar. There are airplanes everywhere. We know the patterns. We know where they're flying into. We have a helicopter route that passes right over our house. It's basically like a taxi for wealthy people. They go into Manhattan and back. We know the helicopters. We know the elevation. These drones were below the helicopters. So you're talking 200 feet, 100 feet off the ground.
Hmm.
And they're huge. They're large, SUV sized, bigger than helicopters, right? But they don't look like anything I've ever seen. Um, they don't look like anything that my friends witnessed at Vandenberg or in other parts of the world. But they do match the historical record. So if you're familiar with the incursions that happened in New England in the late 60s,
Okay.
the Air Force cops were calling in what initially they said might be helicopters, flashing lights, red, green, white lights at very low altitude over nuclear assets in New England. But then the cops would call in, the lights went out when they launched fighters against them, F4s. The lights would go out, these things would vanish. The fighters would fly off, they would pop back in, right over the nuke sites, right over the Air Force cops, just like what happened with me and my buddies. And then they were 200-300 feet off the ground. no noise. So it looks like the pattern is in the historical record. These drone incursions are not new. I don't know what they are or what their intent is, but they're definitely anomalous. And there is a historical record of these types of incursions.
Yeah, I mean, that's great perspective because that's not brought up a lot as far as incursions in the 60s over the New England area. And it sounds extremely familiar to what we're experiencing now. And, and the point of reference in the 60s was helicopters. Now, 60 years later, the point of reference is drones, but neither of which seem to be the case. And I think it's really interesting too, Jeff, for you to be able to speak on it because you're in an extremely unique situation where you did have a legit unknown sighting, over Vandenberg,
Yeah.
and you can compare and contrast between the two. So it's really intriguing to hear you say that there is no noise with these as well. Is the size pretty similar to what you saw in 2005, bigger, smaller? Because we're talking about the SUV sized.
Yeah, the ones it's hard to really judge the size. It's hard to get a clear picture because even when they're relatively close, you can't see them well.
Mm.
And we've got all kind of terrible videos of us trying to capture them, and they're maybe a quarter mile away, and you can't get a good image, and you can't get a good visual with your eyeballs. They looked indistinct. You could just see the lights flashing and sort of. Sometimes we saw what kind of looked triangular, but not sure. Sometimes they kind of look square, and it's like, oh, is that a quadcopter? But you just can't get a good visual. Where, like, if even at nighttime, if a helicopter goes by at that range, eventually it'll resolve, and I could see with my eyeball, oh, there's the tail, and it's a helicopter.
Yeah,
These ones you can't tell what they are.
it's
So
really
they're
strange.
really weird.
Yeah.
And the other thing is and I've said this publicly, and I told AARO this. When I saw that orb object, I just call it an orb at Vandenberg, it never entered my mind that it might be related to human technology.
Hmm.
It was otherworldly.
Hmm.
Otherworldly. When you see these things, you know that they're different. It's like instinctual. It'd be like if you were out hunting and you saw some deer and they were kind of off, and then you got close and they were robot deer.
Hmm.
You would immediately, your brain be like, there is something off with this deer. It is not natural. So yeah, the drones out here, I don't know what they.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, do you get that same feeling though when you see the drones? Do you feel like what I'm seeing here is not man-made? This isn't natural, or is it just like is it more of a confusion
It's
type
more
thing?
confusion. It's you and whoever you're watching with trying to figure out. But I didn't get that sense like, oh my God, this is a UFO.
Right.
Oh my God, this is something unnatural or supernatural. Or we didn't get that feeling. It's just like your brain can't resolve it. You're like, I don't know what I'm looking at. It's it's not a helicopter because your brain goes through all the pattern recognition, and all you are left with is like, this is anomalous. This is different.
Yeah. And again, I mean, like you said, no sound. So obviously you would hear a sound with the helicopter, and you're in a, like I said earlier, a unique position given your past experience with the sighting. Not only that, but you're training in the Air Force. So
Yeah.
you would think for anybody who's listening and thinking, well, this has got to be a misidentification. There's got to be an explanation. Maybe Jeff is just wrong about this. You can speak on it pretty well. I mean, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of experience watching aircraft fly
Right.
at all altitudes, man. Yeah.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and I've also got experience with it, like next generation unmanned aerial vehicles. Like I saw those being deployed during the war. That's what the Air Force. That's what I did a lot of in the wars. I guarded assets like that,
Hmm.
and I know what they look like, and they don't look like these drones. We don't have flashing lights on our stealth weapon and surveillance systems.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a great point because it makes me wonder what you personally thought of when the Trump administration came out with their statement on this. It was Caroline Leavitt's first the new press secretary, is her first press conference. And the first thing she does is read a statement from President Trump saying the FAA authorized these. It was part of a not experiment. I'm trying to remember just off the top of my head.
Research and other things.
Research and various things. That's right. And it was all authorized. Now, I think I can tell from your reaction that we're on the same wavelength of that's just complete,
Yeah.
BS, honestly. So why do you think they came out with that statement when there's so much that we could easily point out to refute it?
That's what keeps me up at night, man. I've always had in the back of my mind, right? I've had this idea, and this hit me very powerfully. When after I spoke with AARO and the congressional hearings happened and all the things behind the scene, I have this terrible worry that I'm on the wrong side of disclosure. That whatever it is so terrifying or bizarre or alien or disturbing that they should and would do anything to keep it secret. So I worry about that. Like, what if I'm on the wrong side and the good guys are actually the ones that are willing to do anything to keep it secret, right? They're the real Avengers. They're like, if you people knew what this really was and what we're dealing with, you would not want this public. And we're working day and night behind the scene to try to mitigate this somehow. That's my deep fear. But despite that, at this point, I'm like, we need to know regardless. If that is the reality, then let's just get it out there. And then as the human race, we can make a decision on what to do. So I hope that's not true. I hope what happened was they brought President Trump into a skiff. They said, okay, Mr. President, here's what we're dealing with. And he said, oh my God, bury it. That's my worry. Now, I don't have any information. This is just pure speculation.
Right.
These are the things that I worry about and I think about, like in this disclosure, because everybody's like, I just want to see it. I just want to know. And it's like, well, be careful what you wish for, right? Because maybe it's something so bizarre that we can't even fathom it, right? I have no idea. Because we literally don't know. It's been 70 years of intense research by brilliant people, book after book, video after video. We know that the government has been interested in desperately researching this incognito for 70 years or more. We know the FBI just came out and said that they've been secretly investigating it too,
Right.
hiding that fact from the public. And then you have to ask yourself why. And it could just be as simple as we keep everything secret. And that is a truism, right? The military and the government overclassify everything. So it could just be that.
Yeah.
Or it could be something terrible. Or, and this is where I like to drag my ideas so I can calm down a bit. Maybe it's something so wonderful that they don't want us to have it because it could change all the paradigms, our economic paradigms, our social paradigms. It could just disrupt whatever the control mechanism that governments and institutions have on us. And that's easy to speculate. Free energy, the ability to be in control of our own, destiny.
Right.
So it could be that, or it could be a blend. I believe it's probably a blend, where there are things out there that are terrifying beyond comprehension, and things that are wonderful beyond comprehension. And us humans are kind of right in the middle, like in Middle Earth, trying to navigate through the labyrinth. And, I don't know. But when they put out that that statement, it kind of broke my heart. It's like, here we are again. Nothing to see here, really.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I had the same reaction, and I can only imagine from where you're sitting, it was probably magnified 10 times. And I can tell you this too, not to try to scare anyone or send, shudders down anybody's spine, but I can't help but to comment on what you said at the beginning there of your answer, which was it's something that keeps you up at night. And it really resonated with me. And I actually got chills when you said it, if I'm being quite honest, because I have a buddy of mine in the service, veteran, works with some, pretty high ranking stuff. And we were talking about this over the weekend, just private conversation, wasn't anything on the show or anything like that. But he's like, dude, when I tell you that when that statement came out, it was the most scared I've ever been in my entire career. And I said, it kind of took me back a little bit because, again, he's been through the wars like you, and he's seen different reports like you that, the public hasn't seen, that would make the general public like take a step back and say, whoa, what is going on here? I didn't know this was going on. Like, he's been through that stuff. And for him to say that to me, I was like, why? And it was really just because of what you said, which is if we're going to go with the negative side, what is so terrible about this, that we have the president who was one of his promises the first night in his Oval Office was to say, I'm going to tell you about this. And then he didn't.
Yeah.
And we're talking about a president, like, let's be honest here. We're talking about a president that pretty much says whatever is on his mind and doesn't.
No filter.
There is no filter. Right. So with this, there was a filter. And I think that was his point, which was there's something being hidden, and I don't know why it's being hidden. So to speak to what you were saying there.
Yeah. Yeah. Drones are the new swamp gas, man.
Yeah.
And that it just made me so angry, because it's, anybody that followed the drone incursions, they know it's all swamp gas. Like, the response was incoherent. No one in the government could explain what was happening, where they were coming from. And the thing is, and this is where the historical record becomes important, right? You've got cops back in the 50s talking about encounters like this, credible people. You've got airline pilots talking about it, credible. You've got the military. And if you look back, I keep going back to these incursions in the 60s in New England. Some showed up on radar, but only military radar. The commercial airlines could not pick up the UAP on radar, but some military grade ones could back in the 60s. But then they would disappear from radar. They would just vanish off the radar. These drones are doing the same thing. They are managing signals. They're not radiating any kind of signals. Like, that's a big deal, man.
Yeah.
There's no thermals. Like, these cops in Ocean City are chasing them, and they're like, there's nothing coming off of this object. There's no heat. There's no radio signal. There's nothing. And that's anomalous, right?
Right.
Like, as far as I know, we can't do that with any of our aircraft. There's always a heat signature. There's always something, right? Even stealth technology is not perfect. It just reduces the signal. But whatever's flying over, that mayor's house is anomalous. No signals, and that. So I'm really disappointed. It's like they should have just came out. I would have rather them said, listen, we got a briefing and we have no idea.
Right.
But we're going to find out, and we need the public to help. So if you see a drone, call the drone hotline. That's what they should be doing. There should be a government sponsored like reporting line for this. And then they could have it all the data aggregated so anybody could go on a website and be like, was that a Starlink or a meteor or Venus or swamp gas or whatever? But right now there's nowhere for the public to go. They're just being told, you don't know what birds are. You don't know what balloons look like. You can't tell if it's a helicopter 200 feet over your house. You're an idiot. No one knows. The Navy pilots don't know what birds are. Nobody knows. You're all just mistaken.
Yeah.
We got more of that. And it's like,
yeah, and to add to that too, I mean, again, not to get like partisan or anything like that, because I don't hear on the show, but just to speak to facts, this is an observation. This is a president who, whether you like it or not, has stuck to everything he said he was going to do. He's doing everything he said he was going to do during campaigning, except this one thing. So that's got to be a red flag. I mean, this is the only thing he hasn't stuck to. So we have to ask the question, why? Right? I mean, am I off on that?
No, you're totally. Listen, if the general public finds out what they really did to Martin Luther King, like, we know a lot. They did horror. I mean, they tried to destroy that guy's life.
Yeah.
Just for speaking his mind, right? And JFK, God only knows what's really going on there. And all these other things that the government knows what they did to Martin Luther King and what happened to JFK. There's no doubt about that. They have been hiding that information, keeping it top secret for decades, right? And that's going to be disruptive, potentially. Like, if people really find out what they were really doing and why JFK was assassinated and who did it, and what they did to these other American icons, that on the surface, at least, these are people that were trying to make the world better, right? And they got killed or destroyed. If the public, if the government's willing at this point to be like, all right, it's been 75 years or whatever, we're going to let you know the truth. It's going to be terrible. You're going to be shocked, but we didn't do it. Everybody that was involved is dead. That could be disruptive. We could have rioting and anger, and they're willing to let that cat out of the bag, but not the UFO thing.
Yeah, makes you wonder. Again, is it the negative side, or is it the positive side about like free energy and things like that, or like you said, is it a blend? So
yeah. And I try to remain very positive. I try not to dwell in negativity, because I think negativity begets more negativity. So I can't help thinking about those things, because that's the way my mind works. And for my background, like, I had to figure out where the bad guys are, what bad things might happen. So, I naturally go down the dark path, but I always try to come back to the light and be like, all right, think positive, and then try to figure out, like, what can we do? And in a positive way, instead of just talking about it. Like, and that's happening now. We have citizen science happening with all these different organizations being spun up that are like, we're not waiting for big daddy government to tell us. We're going to go find out what's happening.
Yeah,
So
you're right.
it's exciting, right?
Yeah, and that is happening a lot. I would still, if you still have time, Jeff. I mean, my gosh, this hour has flown by. I mean, if you still have time, I'd love to still ask you a couple of things. Is that okay?
Yeah, it'd be great.
Awesome. So we'll keep going here. Before I do move on, because I think I mentioned an hour ago that I wanted to ask you about some of the recent developments as far as like the Psionics and things like that, and Jake Barber, Michael Herrera. I do want to get into that side of things, but before I do, just the last couple of things on this and what you're seeing when it comes to, again, the drones, air quotes. Have they been different? Have you noticed, like, hey, this one's different than the one I saw in December, or have they been pretty consistent?
I saw one. It was on I-95. It's about 2 weeks ago. It was rush hour traffic. I'm heading north on I-95. I think I was just south of Philly. And so you're talking wall-to-wall traffic, just red lights and thousands of cars. And there was it looked like an aircraft coming in on approach, but it was flying south directly over I-95, relatively low altitude, super bright light, like a landing light. and it kept getting lower and lower. And eventually, it was like 500 feet over the highway, and it went right over my car and everybody else's car. And as it was getting closer, I'm like, "That's weird. That's weird." So I grabbed my phone, and I'm driving, and I put my car on autopilot. I'm like trying to get my camera, the video, and then it kind of resolved in that bright light got a little bit dimmer, and then I saw the tail lights flashing, red and green. I'm like, "That's a freaking plane." I put my phone down, and all the cars in front of me, the thousands of cars, are hitting their brakes, slowing down, and they're looking over this plane coming right over us. And then it passed over, and I'm like, "That is not a plane."
Oh, wow.
And I wish I had a video capture. Another podcaster had a video of a similar object. It was on a news reel, and it looked like a plane. It was plane shaped, but it was smaller, too small. It was like shaped like a passenger plane, but too small.
Hmm.
And it looked like a freaking mechanical shark or something, man.
Hmm.
It didn't look like a plane. And it didn't look like a shark, but the way it was built was more like organic.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, what the hell was that? And the ones around here, like I said, my girlfriend saw one that was distinctly triangular in shape, but she couldn't really make it out. And it was dark, but not super dark. And she couldn't figure out why she couldn't resolve it. But she couldn't. She said like the structure looked almost like a shadow of a triangle. Like she couldn't see like a physical triangle. And then, like I said, some of them looked square, but that could have just been the light arrangement.
Right.
So I don't know what they are. And they do look different. And some of them that we saw in Jersey were much larger. Some look really tiny.
Hmm.
But then again, it's hard to tell because it's really difficult to tell range something in the sky. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
If something's a mile off or a half a mile off or at 5,000 feet or 3, so it's all an estimation. But yeah, it's weird. You can't really get a good look at it.
So, last question on this, because one of the theories about this has been, I guess going back to the statement about various activities and research. Why, in your experience, has there ever been a scenario where the government or the FAA or any type of government agency or military, for that matter, would authorize some type of activity like that over an urban area without putting out any type of notice to air missions, notice to airmen, any type of NOTAMs to anybody in the area? Because as far as I know, there hasn't been a NOTAM put out within the past couple months. I mean, does that make any sense to you that they would be conducting some type of high-tech research over urban areas?
No. And that's the thing, man. That's where they could claim whatever it is, but and David Fravor said this, I think, during the hearing. He's like, we don't test tech on our own people in our ranges. We have ranges for that.
Right.
And that's true. And it would be incredibly irresponsible for anybody to run an operation like this, because I don't care how advanced the tech is, things break. And that's the thing. Like I did a lot of work related to crash retrievals during the war. These are not UFOs. These were our tech that they brought out when the war started. These were just advanced unmanned aircraft, and they kept crashing. And then me and teams, we would go out and we would secure the site until contractors came in and did an evaluation, and we would just guard the thing. So I have experience doing that, like real world experience, provable experience. And so if they are conducting research and other various things, it's wildly inappropriate, because if a SUV sized drone comes down on a neighborhood, a school, like why take that risk?
Yeah.
Why not do it? We have all of Nevada is a test range.
Right. Right.
New Mexico, huge test ranges. Why would they do it in New Jersey? Why are they flying around in Manhattan? There are buildings there,
Hmm.
right? None of it makes sense. And why are they shutting down Langley? Why are they shutting down Lake and Heath? Why are they shutting down Mildenhall?
Correct.
Why, why would you have your law enforcement resources scrambling, running around, wasting time and putting people in danger, chasing drones and helicopters? That's incredibly dangerous for the police and for the public. All it takes is one cop to get freaked out because something shows up right next to him in a helicopter, and now he's crashed into a home.
Yeah.
So if the story that the administration put out is real, everybody should be angry. Every mayor, every governor, every head of an agency, every congressman should be screaming and pounding on doors and hauling people in front of Congress under oath, explaining why they're putting our first responders, our military, and the public and our children at risk with this freaking research.
Hmm.
It's damaging national security. If they can't fly out of Langley, if they can't get our F-22s and F-35s in the air because the FAA is screwing around, big problem, right? So none of it makes sense. It's all swamp gas. They're hiding the truth again. And it's going to be just up to us, we the people and the public, collecting our own data, getting our own videos, our own radar tracks, and we have to let the public know what's going on. We have to do it ourselves because they are not going to tell us the truth.
Yeah, it sure seems that way now, doesn't it? Unfortunately. On that note, I'll switch it up here before we're done. And thanks again, Jeff, for joining and for spending so much time.
Thank you for having me, man. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
absolutely, anytime. So going towards what I mentioned earlier, the kind of the current situation surrounding now this discussion that was always kind of in the background. It was always kind of taboo, quite frankly, and a topic that's taboo itself sometimes that has a stigma related to it. With the UAP topic, there's even more taboo when it comes to psionics and psychic abilities, remote viewing, being able to consciously connect to a craft and call it down or bring it down or interact with it. These are the things that now are coming out into the forefront of the conversations because of what has come out with Jake Barber through the Ross Coulthart video interviews, the crash recovery of the AUAP, and the subsequent conversations surrounding what Jake Barber says was this type of connection that he had. Now working with Skywatcher, his group, employing psionic talented people, I guess you could say, people with psionic abilities who are able to connect with these things. What is your take as you've seen this all going down? Are you familiar with anything like this ever being experimented on in your military career that you come across? And do you think they're onto something?
I think they're on to something. I mean, so we'll, I guess, start with just the psionics. Okay. So I'm a hyper skeptical human being. Again, very scientifically minded. I have a graduate degree in science. I've done science. I understand the scientific method. And then from my background is based in is evidence based, right? We're trying to find out who committed the crime, where's the missing child, whatever. So very fact based and evidence based. But again, like throughout my life, I had to completely reevaluate because people I know and love would demonstrate what you could call psionics abilities, precognition, things like that. And I think if most people really take some time and meditate on this, think about it, they'll come to the same conclusion. Many, many women that I know, after either during, pregnancy or after having a child, have had some kind of psychic type phenomenon where, and I've seen this personally with my ex-wife and my children, where my wife would come in and say, I got to call daycare. Something's happened to, our daughter. And then the phone would ring and it'd be daycare. Hey, your daughter had an accident. She got a boo-boo, whatever. Many women in my family have demonstrated that capacity on and on. And I don't think the women in my family are special. I think that all women probably experience something like that with their children or dreams. They wake up and say, I had a dream that, so-and-so died. And then the phone will ring, like within minutes. Hey, whoever passed away. So I've seen that with people I know and love, family members. So I have to start with there. Like I've seen that, and I've had, everybody can kind of like relate to like, I was just thinking about you, and then they call.
Right.
I've had that happen a lot. I think many people do. And then there's phenomenon like deja vu that I cannot get a psychologist or psychiatrist to explain to me a feasible reason or explanation on what deja vu is, because I've experienced powerful deja vu. And it's like, what is going on? Like I'm seeing it as it's happening and I know about it as it's happening. Like, what is that? So we don't know that much about the human mind, and we know almost nothing about consciousness from a scientific perspective. But if you look at religious and magical traditions throughout the ages, it's all right there. Like you can look at all kind of different esoteric practices where people can get in a meditative state, or they can do some kind of ritualistic magic, and they can either see visions, they can remote viewing. They used to call it scrying, right? So there's a long history of humans trying to tap into our consciousness to gain some kind of power or control over reality. So I'm starting there. Like fundamentally, yes, I believe it. I didn't always, but I do now. And then you could shift gears into, okay, what's happening in science? So decades ago, I know the Air Force was working on interfacing the mind with tech. And they had, I don't even know what it was called, but it was an interface where, and now it's out in public where you can put on a helmet and fly an airplane, right? You can interface directly with the computer with, what's Elon's new tech? The Neuralink, right? I think I saw an article the other day where the Neuralink patients can interface directly with a robot, and the robot can draw what they're thinking.
Wow.
So this tech has been developed by the US government. I don't know how sophisticated it is, but they had mind-computer interface. And this was a long time ago. It was primitive, but I remember seeing articles saying, yeah, we could get these people to, interact with a computer screen. They can move the cursor. And now with Neuralink, apparently the Neuralink patient is like the best video gamer in the world because he's doing it at the speed of thought.
Wow.
So now we move on to interfacing with UAP. So when I hear, this is all new information to me. I've never heard anything about psychic assets being deployed or used by the US military. This is all brand new for me. So I'm taking everything with a leap of faith. But I'm falling into the camp that these people are legitimate, and I believe that they will be able to replicate what they're claiming they can do. So the jury's out. We have to wait and see if they can replicate what they're claiming they can replicate, which is they can summon UAP and then interface directly with them and even gain some kind of measure of control. Now, at one point in my life, I would have thought that was completely like I used to write off the remote viewing stuff as complete nonsense.
Hmm.
Because I'm like, then just remote view the Powerball, dude. What are you wasting your time for?
Right.
Like, right? If
Sure.
it's that easy, just remote view everything we need and spill the beans. But that never happened. Like, I've never heard of somebody remote viewing the Powerball and like, hey, I've won the Powerball 5 times in a row.
Hmm.
So that's where I would fall. Like, I'm like, I had this baseline belief, like, yeah, this could all be real. And I've seen people do things and have precognitive dreams, and I've had things like that too. And then I at the same time I'm writing off, the remote viewers because I'm like, that's just too easy.
Hmm.
You could just remote view everything and know everything and win at everything, right? But I don't think it works like that. So now I have fallen into a state where this is all um, extremely plausible. I think we're in a very unique part in history where ancient traditions that used to be considered magic or mystical traditions are running headlong into science.
Hmm.
And we're going to find out that the world and consciousness is much more mysterious than we thought in a materialistic view. The materialists are missing most of the picture, in my opinion.
Right.
So it's going to be exciting. So I'm hoping that Jake Barber and his team can replicate this on a large scale, and then we can start moving forward. Now there is some danger because when you study all these magical traditions and practices, there's nothing but warnings. Like, you have to do this correctly because you don't know what you're dealing with. You don't know what you're summoning, and we don't.
Yeah.
So let's say Jake is 100% legit. His team can summon these objects. We have no idea what they are. And if I was something with ill intent, like a predator, here's how predators act. Like child predators.
Mhm.
They entice, right? They make you comfortable. They're warm and they're welcoming and they're helping. And then they put you in a van, and then it's terrible. And that could be what's happening. So we don't know whatever these NHI are. And I use that term now because that's what the government uses
Right.
in official legislation that the general public and the media just seem to blow off. Like, we're talking about non-human intelligences, and we're not talking about whales.
That's right. Right.
So we're in a weird state where now people are claiming we can basically do magic. We can summon things from beyond.
Hmm.
They manifest in reality, and we can interface directly with them. And that's worrying for me because, like, I see people on Twitter, they're like, hey, we're going to do remote viewing practice. I'm like, fine. But it's like jumping into like psychedelics, like ayahuasca and things like that. I've never done that, but there's an interest in doing it, but very cautiously.
Yeah.
Like, what are you tapping into? What are you interacting with? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. So we need to, like, the experiments happening now. Like, what happens when we conduct large scale, ritualistic, magical, technical processes, and we have thousands of people doing ceremonial magic, like techno ceremonial magic on a large scale. Like, what will happen? I don't know. Maybe more than one egg shows up. Like, what's in the egg?
Yeah, right. It does, feel like a little bit of uncharted waters, even though, like you said, it's been going on for a long time, whether or not we wanted to acknowledge it or put it in the mainstream, so to speak. The fact that it is being brought out to the forefront feels new for a lot of people. And I wonder, and I'll get you out of here shortly after this. I wonder your take on the spiritual aspect, right? We spoke a little bit about the spirituality side of things, and we talk about, what are we summoning? How do you think the spiritual aspect kind of connects to all this? I know it's a deeper question. I know it's probably something we can write, do an hour long just on that, quite frankly. But when we talk about, what are we summoning? Are these different types of beings? Are they NHI? Are they angels or demons? That question is asked a lot. It's brought up in pretty high circles, actually. It's not really a crazy thing to ask in a lot of people's minds. So, I mean, how do you think this all intersects?
I think it all does intersect in some way. So I've been, that's one of the deepest, most interesting questions I have. I'm less interested in the nuts and bolts and the physics. Like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated in the spiritual implications of this, the ontological implications of this, like what's happening. So luckily for me, I am now good friends with some really top minds on this subject. So I have a good friend named Paul Thigpen.
Hmm.
He's a theologian and a scholar of, he's a Catholic, and he's been studying this. He wrote an excellent book that I'm still working through. It's a dense dive into this very question about how it relates to Catholicism.
Hmm.
Like he's trying to get the church to engage with the broader public about how do we think about NHI. There are demons and devils and angels and saints and NHI, and how does it all relate? So I've been talking quite a bit to Paul and my other friend Luke and another theologian, Matthew Hallstatt, and they're trying to explore this very topic. So what I get from Paul, and Paul's book is called, I believe it's called Extraterrestrials in the Catholic Faith.
Hmm. I need to talk to this guy. I'm just going to throw that out there. I would love to talk to him.
Definitely put you into contact with Paul. He is a brilliant, brilliant theologian. He's just an incredibly good human being and incredible intellect.
I love it.
And basically, what the at least the Catholic perspective is, and this gets all, and then to get into this realm, you have to dive into the rabbit hole into you're talking about demons and exorcisms and possessions, because the Catholic Church has protocols to suss that out. So if they have somebody that comes to them and they're having encounters, let's say, with orbs or spirits or aliens or whatever, the church has long established, scientifically established protocols to try to suss out what they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And according to Paul and the church in general, they can make a determination if an encounter involves a spiritual entity, a demon, or an angel. They're different. And then there are NHI. They don't know what the NHI are, but according to their tradition, they're distinctly different from angels and demons. These are different types of entities that all would fall, I guess, broadly under non-human intelligence, right? And there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes to try to get the church to engage and educate the public about this topic, because people like me have questions. Like I have children, and other people have children, and people they love, and you have this terrifying aspect of the phenomenon with the abductions, right? And that's a topic I never delved into because it's too scary for me. I worked a lot on kidnappings and child abductions and stuff.
Yeah.
Nothing more terrifying than that to me. So this is a conversation that needs to be had. Like, and it falls into your cultural and religious context. Like, what do you believe? Like, do you believe in angels and demons at all? Do you believe in aliens at all? And then if you have some kind of encounter with just a light or an orb or a craft or a being or a shadow creature, and you're not religious and you don't have any kind of background to deal with that, then a lot of people I know that have had encounters that are not religious or spiritual, they really have a hard time handling because they internalize it and they're like, I am mentally ill.
Mm.
I have, maybe there's a tumor in my brain. I'm hallucinating. I have schizophrenia. I'm having a nervous breakdown. And a lot of people end up on a very dark road and they're very alone. And they end up with psychologists and psychiatrists dealing with them that have no idea what they're dealing with. They look at it from a clinical perspective. You need drugs. There's something wrong with you. So this is a very important topic that we need to have with the general public.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And maybe it's to be continued on that. Maybe if I can, talk to Paul on a different day or have you back on as well, because I'd love to have you back on, Jeff, and especially when you are able to give more details. Real quick, just in case people are wondering, if you can answer the why, because I'm sure there are some people wondering why when they say, well, why can't he go into more details about his stories that we heard at the beginning of our discussion. What is the answer to that? Can you answer the why on that?
It's nothing deep and dark or anything like that. There's a lot of movement behind the scenes. I'll say that. And how do I put this? There's just some interested parties that are trying to do very good things with the Vandenburg case, um, for the benefit of the general public, that would just like for me to kind of rein in bringing out additional details until we're ready. Um, there's a lot of people that were involved in those encounters that are not public. They haven't had an opportunity to tell their story. There's a lot of other encounters that occurred at Vandenberg that are not public at all.
Hmm.
I'm working with some of those people to try to encourage them to come out. They're extremely credible. Um, they had extraordinary encounters like mine,
Wow.
close up encounters with craft. So we're trying to make the space safer and more coherent, put the narrative together more coherently, and kind of bring everything out at once instead of me popping bits and pieces out here on this podcast or there. That's really just it. Nothing deep and dark. We're just trying to kind of coordinate behind the scenes, and people won't have to wait long. I'm talking a couple of months, and then we're going to start bringing out more details, more information, more people, and I'm really excited about. They're not whistleblowers; they're just witnesses because their information is not classified, but they are beyond reproach. These are some of the most baddest dudes that have ever walked the walk as far as the military. And they're getting ready to come out in a big public way. So it'll be worth the wait.
That's awesome. Wow, that's exciting. I mean, I would love to follow up with you on that, or any of the guys that are willing to talk in a few months. I mean, just to be able to have those conversations down the road and to hear their stories. That's an exciting prospect. So, I mean, where do you think all this is going to be? Let's say by December. Where do you see all this standing as far as knowledge goes and what's out in the public?
I think a flood is coming. I've been pushing for that since the beginning. I think enough people have been emboldened and encouraged by the hearings, by all the whistleblowers and testimony that's coming out. A lot of it with evidence. We're not dealing with just stories anymore. A lot of these incidents that are like they're too difficult to believe even for me, but behind the scenes they are resolving, and it looks like a lot of these people that have been kind of demonized and ridiculed publicly are legitimate, and there's more of that coming in a big way. And I think that's going to continue, and it's eventually going to become deniable where there's just too many credible military witnesses that have no reason to come out publicly
Hmm.
and humiliate themselves and put their names out there. They're not looking for fame. They're not looking for fortune. They're really just patriotic people. They're mothers and fathers, and they love their country and they love humanity, and they want the public to know this is all real, and they want to find out, just like me, like they don't know what it is. Like no one I know um, really knows what they saw. They have ideas. They've been told by the powers to be, like, oh, you saw this and you saw that, and this is what it is. But no one knows for sure. And I think this flood that is coming by the end of the year, it'll be undeniable. And I'm not so much worried about getting the government to disclose anything. Like, I don't have much confidence that they'll ever do that. But I think with all the citizen science, I'm really hoping the Galileo project and all the different, the new Skywatcher, they could just show us, like, here, we've got the data and we've got evidence, and it's, you can replicate these studies, and it's all there. And then we can really start to have the conversation about what is really going on. And that's in every domain. And for me, the biggest domain is the religious and spiritual and medical side of it. Like the medical stuff, I know people that I've met people that have been injured by these craft. And I've been very close to them, and I have health issues too. That the doctors can't diagnose. We don't know why you're sick. And then it turns into the whole thing. Is it Gulf War syndrome? Is it because you were exposed to chemicals or radiologics? Who knows? But at least then we can start having the conversation, like, what are they? Why are they here? What does it mean? What are the implications? And then practical things like, what are the health implications? What happens if you get close to one of these?
Yeah. Wow. Just incredible stuff, Jeff. I mean, and I appreciate. I mean, honestly, I'll just tell you now, this has been one of my most favorite interviews I've ever done.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah, I mean, this has just been so fascinating for me, so intriguing. Just the depth of the conversation that we've been able to touch on, and all these different topics, to get your perspective on it, given your unique experience in all the different realms, whether it's military history, sighting history, these experiences. It's, and your location as well, when it comes to, personal experience with what's flying around out there in the New Jersey location.
Yeah.
This has just been fantastic. So I appreciate you doing this and spending all this time. It's actually been one of the longest interviews I've ever done.
Oh, great.
I don't normally do the theme is never really to go like the Sean Ryan, Joe Rogan, 3-4 hour interviews. That's not really what I end up doing, but you've had the time, and this has not felt like an hour and a half at all. So I just figured, let's keep going, because it's been a fantastic.
We could go, and like I said, man, I'll try to send some of my friends your way. I would love to get Paul and Luke and Matthew. They're three like incredible minds that understand the spiritual and religious implications, and they're out there writing white papers for Soul, and they're in the trenches. And it's an important conversation, and I would love to hook you guys up, and maybe we could all jump on and do a 3-hour one, because they can, the topic is just endless, and it's fascinating, and it's important. So
absolutely.
And I really appreciate the work you're doing, man. It's really important work. And I see the podcasters as really frontline troops. You guys are the ones putting your time and money and energy into giving people like me time and to talk about it. So you guys are the frontline soldiers. So anything I could do to help, anytime you need me, you've got my number, man. Give me a call, and I'll be right there for you.
I truly appreciate that. Thank you, Jeff. And thanks for everything here today on UAP. We're definitely going to stay in touch. And I can't wait to have you back on again. And like you said, maybe when the dam starts to break a little bit, we'll have you back on the information side of things as well.
Yeah.
on how we can tie this all together once you can put more of that out there. So I think a lot to look forward to, which is great. So thanks so much.
Right on, man.
Appreciate it. Jeff Nuccetelli here on UAP. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to all your listeners. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Absolutely.